Welcome to Leading People with me, Jerry Murray. This episode of Leading People is brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's widecircle.eu. Leading People is a podcast which features insightful conversations with leading people about leading people. Yes, that's a play on words. In each episode, you get tips from leading people such as CEOs, HR professionals, authors, and thought leaders on all aspects of leading people, including how to attract, engage, develop, and grow talent to build successful organizations. And we provide insights on how to lead yourself so you can consistently perform at your best. In this episode, I chat with author and master of negotiations, Simon Horton, about how we can all become better at negotiating. Simon Horton, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jerry. Thanks very much for having me here.
Great to have you on. It's been a while since we were hanging out together in London many years ago, and I see things have really moved on for you this last while. So maybe for our listeners who don't know you yet, and they will do by the time we're finished, maybe just how did you get here? Is there a person, place, or event that stands out on your journey, or was there this kind of epiphany moment that you sort of thought, this is where I want to be in my career, and this whole negotiation, because this is one of the areas that you're an expert in. So off you go.
Yeah, so it's probably a bit of both. There's a journey and there's probably an epiphany moment as well. So as you say, what I do is that I teach negotiation skills, and I've been doing it for about 15 years, do it around the world, work with a lot of in finance, law firms, visiting lecturer at Imperial College, author of The Leader's Guide to Negotiation, published by the Financial Times. My first career was very, very different. My first career was in asset management and technical roles, specifically designing derivatives trading systems. And I was very successful at it. I designed a derivatives trading system that the majority of the city ended up using. So very successful at it, but I hated every moment of it. And I just wasn't happy. And I kind of, when you go through kind of mini crisis to mini crisis at a kind of a personal level, and you realize that you need to do something to sort it out. And that epiphany moment was actually an ex-girlfriend. As she left and slammed the door behind her, she just turned around and said, "You need to sort your head out." And she was right, I did. And so I did. And so I got into psychology, and I got into things like NLP, which is where we met, obviously, and got into many things around how to sort my head out. And the good news is that it worked. I've now got a much better working head than I did then. But then there was the question, well, okay, actually, I love this so much. I find this material so fascinating, this field so fascinating. I want to build my business in it, but how do I earn money in that? And in the corporate world, typically they don't buy psychology per se, but they do buy its applications. And negotiation is the closest application to psychology, closest to the bottom line. So that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. I chose it as my field. I started off with the general soft skills, but then niched more and more into negotiation. And still to this day, I still find it a fascinating topic, because there's still more being learned, pretty much every day in the field. Okay,
so you mentioned you've written 2 books.
Yep.
I really like the intro to your book for leaders. You say the following, and I quote it for our listeners and viewers. Negotiation is not actually very important, nor is the agreement that follows, nor the contract, nor the signatures. They're all quite unimportant. And then you go on to explain how negotiation fits into a 3-stage model. And we'll get to that later in our conversation. So that's coming up a bit later. Why should we
all become good at negotiating?
Well, yes. I think we're negotiating all the time. I think, pretty much any interaction is a negotiation of sorts. We tend to view negotiation as these big set piece things that take place late at night, smoke-filled rooms, people banging the table, lawyers involved, lots of shouting, etc. And yes, those are the formal negotiations, but I think we're negotiating informally all the time. That you want a pay rise, that's a negotiation. You are in a relationship, that's a negotiation. You want to get out of a relationship, that's a negotiation. You want your partner to take the rubbish out, that's a negotiation. We're negotiating all the time. So if one of my mantras is get good at negotiation, get good at life. It's so pervasive in our world as a skill.
Yeah. I've had the good fortune this last few years to actually be asked to teach negotiations at the EU, believe it or not. It always raises some eyebrows this last few years.
Yes.
But I enjoy it so much because I've done so much of it over the years. And I've been in those small negotiations, as you say. Some went well, some didn't. And I've been in the corporate negotiations. Once again, some of them I've done a lousy job at the beginning. And what it is you learn as you go along. And if you embrace certain models, they do actually work quite well. So I'd like to just let's get into your 3-stage model, and we'll evolve from there. You have these two nice definitions at the beginning of the book, and you say, let's have a working definition for negotiating, and you say the process through which two or more parties come to an agreement or an action to be carried out. And then you have this great, simple, but very poignant and very profound definition of a leader, being a leader, having a vision and making it happen, which very much links nicely to that definition of negotiations. So let's get into your 3 stages. What's the first stage in terms of your model?
So that's a very simple setup for my negotiation methodology, and it is that basically there are 3 stages to the negotiation, which is firstly there's the conversation that we have, which we typically view as the negotiation, and that conversation leads to an agreement, and then that agreement results in actions being implemented in the real world, and people view negotiation, as I said, as that conversation, and that they really try and develop their skills, or perhaps they might think of it as the agreement, and they think, look how good I am, what a great negotiator I've got, look at this agreement, I've got them to sign this, I've got them to sign that. And yet, all of that bluster and conversation at the beginning, all of those signatures on the piece of paper count for nothing unless it gets implemented in the real world. What happens in the real world is what's most important. So you always need to bring that into your mind as you're conducting the negotiation. And many things follow from that. One example of something that follows from that is that don't take the win-lose approach to negotiation. If you've got the power, some people think, right, well, I'm going to push it through just because I can. I don't have to take them into account. Well, actually, you do, because if you do take that win-lose approach and you force something through simply because you can, what you'll find is that the other party will find a way of evening it up, which you won't necessarily know about it. So they'll put they're juniors on the job, they'll use cheaper material, they'll cut corners, they'll follow the letter of the agreement rather than the spirit. They'll find a way of evening it up. And the classic example of that for me is the good old horse meat scandal, where the supermarkets and the big buyers squeeze their suppliers and really squeeze them more because they could. And the suppliers said, yeah, whatever, we'll sign. And then they put horse meat in the burger rather than beef. And it became that win-lose approach became a lose-lose outcome, a lose for everybody.
Okay. So getting into the, let's get a bit into the nuts and bolts of negotiations. and some of the conundrums that people encounter. And I'll throw one in just to get the conversation moving along this line, because I think this is one that a lot of people maybe sometimes struggle or are challenged with, this idea about should you be nice or should you be tough?
Yeah, it's a good question. And because, some people think, I should be really nice, but then they end up giving away everything in order to be nice. And other people are really tough and they don't budge an inch from their position. But then perhaps the other person doesn't want to work with them and doesn't work with them ever again. And the tough person, the tough negotiator doesn't know why, kind of thing. So my view is, yes, be nice and be tough, kind of thing. And it is that sort of build good relationship, but don't build good relationship at the expense of your outcome. It's the idea of kind of be tough on your outcome, be strong on your outcome, but be kind of soft in your approach to it. And I often have people say to me, Simon, I'm not a very good negotiator because I'm too nice. And I actually think being nice in a negotiation is good, as long as you don't sacrifice your outcome for the niceness. And what I try to do is I try to give a bit more robustness to the nice people out there in the world, and a little bit more strength to them. And to the tough people in the world, I try and get them to soften their edges a little bit, because it is in that kind of that mixed, that somewhere in between, which is the right answer.
There's a lot we could unpack there. I mean, particularly around the relationship. There's this sort of model of relationship and process and the sort of issues, those three dimensions. Yeah. The one thing you've mentioned, which is something that connects us a little bit in our past, earlier where we met, in the NLP world, a well-formed outcome is almost sacrosanct as a starting point. And maybe even some of the criticism NLP gets about, people getting advantage of others. My view has always been that actually the person with the better well-formed outcome tends to do quite well in any interaction. Absolutely. And the other person usually who feels that has not got a great haven't really thought through their outcome. So maybe some of the principles of well-formed outcomes can help guide people on what we mean by getting the balance between hard and soft. Isn't that right? Yeah,
totally. So when I run workshops, when I teach negotiation skills, I start with, what is your outcome? What is it that you want to achieve? And we spend a lot of time really fleshing out the outcome we want from that negotiation. And I encourage people to be ambitious, and I encourage people to be creative about that. But it's not just your outcome. It's also as part of your preparation, understand the other party's outcome as well. And the more you can get each of those clearly defined, and if both parties can bring clearly defined outcomes to the negotiation, the much more likely that they are to find the solution that suits both parties. Now, there is a really interesting example of this going on at the moment. I don't know whether you've heard of Brexit, Jerry, but there's it's the great negotiation that is exactly
what's that
that has been clogging our airwaves for the last 50 years, it seems, or my lifetime. And if we go back to, why has that been so problematical? I think one of the problems is that they did not have a clearly defined outcome at the beginning of their negotiations. And classically, Theresa May becomes Prime Minister and starts conducting these negotiations, and she does a lot of time consulting various bodies, various industries, various regions within the country. What is it that they want? And then eventually she does this big landmark speech where she says, right, we've now thought it through, we now know what we want, and Brexit is Brexit. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, I've got it. Yeah, really clear. Thanks, Theresa. Again, after all of this consultancy, she still comes up with the vaguest definition possible. So and I think that's one of the difficulties of the current negotiation, is that there has not been clearly defined outcomes on either side, to be fair.
Yeah. And without being political, because I don't even live in the UK, I can make this observation. She kind of put a very firm line in the sand, which has been difficult to move from, which is, Brexit means Brexit, but also no deal's better than a bad deal. Wasn't that one of her famous sayings?
That was.
Which might have been playing to the gallery, but it's one of those mistakes people make when they go into a negotiation, is that they jump right into, this is what I want and that's it. And then you go around in circles, because there's a loss of face if somebody has to backtrack. Whereas I guess maybe we should just talk relationships we get, right? The well-formed outcome also talks about ecology. If we go back to the NLP stuff, it talks about ecology, which therefore would introduce this idea of win-win. It also specifies criteria, like how would you know you got your outcome? And often, if we go step one back before we go into negotiating, there is this preparation phase. And I think that some people don't spend enough time in the preparation phase, and that includes thinking the outcome through. But Absolutely. Tell us a bit about what you've noticed in working with clients and training people, but this tendency to jump in, because you put action at the end of your three-part model.
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
This tendency to jump in? Because if you don't define the process and you don't talk about these things, you can end up in an awful mess. So maybe tell us a little bit, what's your tips and advice on that?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that preparation is key. And you're right that people don't. And partly that's because of how the world is. We might have all the best intentions and we set aside an hour in our calendar to prepare for the negotiation, but then the world steps in and that hour disappears, and so we don't get the time to do it. And we find ourselves in the taxi with our colleague, turning up at the client's office, and we say, who are we talking to again? What are we talking to them about? That we just haven't done the preparation. And that means the negotiation is not going to go as well as you would like. I was working with this isn't his official title, but broadly speaking, he was chief purchasing officer for one of the big Japanese electronics giants. And he described his job as he would get flown in whenever a big purchasing negotiation had gone wrong. And he said it invariably went wrong because of insufficient preparation. And his description was that 70% of the negotiation is in the preparation. And I totally agree. My view is that the best negotiations don't even seem like a negotiation. They just seem like a nice conversation. You sit down, you have a nice cup of coffee, you have a nice chat, and at the end of it, you shake hands, and then you go, how did that happen? How do we get there? And you can have those conversations, those really successful, smooth negotiations, if you set it up correctly beforehand, and that's all part of the preparation. Massively important.
Yeah, and what I've noticed as well is, anything that's worth having a formal negotiation about implies there will be some sort of ongoing relationship afterwards. Yeah. And one of the things I think maybe you can share because I'd like you to share some, examples of these things as we go through now. One of the things I've noticed as well is that the process of the negotiation can also give you insights into the relationship you may experience when you enter into when the rubber hits the road and you've got to get into action points. You may actually decide that based on the negotiation process, it's not worth going into that relationship, couldn't you?
I totally agree. That my view is, and this is another reason why I think we should go in with a collaborative win-win approach, because if we don't, the other person just might think, do you know what? There's enough collaborative people out there. There's enough deals out there to be had that I don't need to work with you. So, and that's my approach. If I'm in any negotiation, if I think, I'm not sure I can trust this person, or this person's a bit aggressive, or they're asking too much or whatever, I just think, do you know what? There's enough deals out there in the world that I don't need to work with this person. So, and typically you can tell how that person is going to behave in the long run through that short run, through that sort of that first dealings with them in the negotiation itself. So often we have clients who will try and, when you're first talking to them, they will squeeze you down and they'll ask and this and they'll be quite tricky clients. And you know that they are going to be the clients who all the way through the relationship are going to be difficult. And a year down the line, you're going to be thinking, why have I got this client? Do I really need them? And perhaps you just should have noticed that earlier on, and you should have just saved everybody time and said goodbye and worked with a different client.
In the next part of our conversation, Simon gives some examples of how negotiating skills have helped people achieve more. And he elaborates on some key distinctions that we need to understand and master if we're to become better at negotiating. And do you have some examples of leaders where they had to adapt their style, based on the work you did with them, where they realized that their hard style wasn't getting them anywhere and certainly maybe not even producing these hard results? Just maybe talk to us about some examples of how this works, so that if any leader is listening to this or anybody advising leaders, that they can get some tips from you on why that's working.
Yeah, so one example was a business leader that I worked with and I coached over a period of a couple of years. And even in that first year, basically, he changed his way of working and was able to quadruple his business in that year because he partly, there were a couple of things involved. One was exactly what we've just been talking about, that he did. Too many of his clients were tricky clients that would always be pushing him down, squeezing him there, etc. And they would be tricky all the way through the life cycle. So very early on in our working relationship, he got that, and he thought, right, I don't need this. I can be much happier. And it will free up a lot more time if I get rid of this person and this person and this person, and in terms of clients. And new clients coming on, I'm going to kind of test for that. I'm going to look out for that. And I'm just going to say, no, this is it. You can take. I'm not going to do that dance of, oh, okay, here's another 10%. Oh, okay, you can have 5% off this as well, kind of thing. I'm just not going to do that. And as a result of that, he ended up with all of his clients being good clients, profitable clients, high margin clients, and it freed him up to do a big restructuring of his organization and a big new marketing campaign and kind of rebranding. And that took his business within the year, an absolute huge step change of doing that. And the other thing that he did was he kind of stepped into the shoes of his customer. We went through a process of taking a couple of examples of his clients and prospective clients, and we went through a process where he stepped into their shoes and thought, well, what are they looking for? And then in terms of that rebranding process, he thought, right, I will give them that. And one of the things that he worked out that what they were looking for was quality. So the clients that he wanted to work with were at the top end of the market. So they were looking for high quality. So they wanted to see quality in everything that he did. And that would then give them the trust that his work for them is going to be high quality. So when I say everything that he did, I mean the clothes he wore, the branding, the office space, the flyers, all had to be. He upgraded all of that to communicate subconsciously he was at a high quality level, and the quality of his work that he was going to provide for them was going to be of a high quality level.
Yeah, there's something in there, even as you talk, it's great. Is this sort of authenticity around values, beliefs, and identity? Isn't there this idea? Because what you start talking to me about is it seems that fed into his decision making around who he didn't want to work with.
Absolutely. Because that then gives a really clear idea of if you're thinking, well, who do I want to work with? Well, I'll work with anybody. Then you'll probably be inundated with crap work, with unprofitable work that's going to take up all your time, that's going to be really infuriating for you, and you'll never be able to move yourself because you just won't have the time, to the market that you do want to work with. But once he went through that kind of that process of defining, as you say, what his values were, who he does want to work with, this kind of stuff, he was then able to be much clearer about, yes, work with these people, no, don't work with these people.
Right. And that probably feeds into this idea of how this idea of having the distinction between interests and positions. I guess interests really, from my experience, they're often values-driven factors, right? What advice do you have for anybody out there about how to recognize and understand their interests? Because the principles of win-win, and you can speak about this, come back down to, if you understand the interests, you can shift your positions around to get what you want, as long as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit on a key distinction between a good negotiator and what I call an old school Neanderthal negotiator. And the Neanderthal negotiator they're the haggler, and they're the person who says, oh, I'm not going to pay any more than 10 dirhams for that vase or whatever. And then the other person says, well, for you, it's 20 dirhams, and you do that dance and you might end up in the middle if you're lucky. But even if you do end up in the middle, it'll be begrudging. And you'll have set it up for a bad working relationship. And as you say, most things that you negotiate have got a future relationship involved as well. And if you've just done that arm wrestle kind of approach to negotiation, then you've not set that future working relationship up well. And it's always going to be a fight between you. Instead, to carry on. Instead, what you want to do is focus on the interests, and those are your bigger picture goals, your strategic objectives. What that vase? Why is it that you want that vase? Well, I want to have a great memory of my holiday, or whatever. Or I want something to show off to my friends when they come into the room, and I want something in the set piece to make my room look really good. Okay, that's what's important, and focus on that. And then if you can focus on that the question why do I want this, or what is this all about? And if they focus on the same, then at that interest level, which is a higher level than the positions, you'll nearly always get a much better solution that will suit both parties. Yeah.
And I'll leave people to go to your website to learn more about the arm wrestling, because I think that's... Let's keep that for them. That's a great principle, isn't it? You actually remind me of that scene in The Life of Brian, if you ever saw the movie, where the guy wants to buy the beard. Yes. Brian wants to buy the beard, and he just wants to offer whatever he can. The guy, they send up the whole negotiating thing when he doesn't haggle,
Yes.
So very funny. In terms of... getting towards the agreement. The other thing I quite like, would you like to tell the story about the waiter and the soup?
So it's one of my principles. I've got a number of kind of principles that I talk about in the book, and one of the principles is never be rude to the waiter. And it is that idea that, it's the nature of their job that you can. You can swear at them, you can shout at them, you can tell them they're a disgrace to the field of waiters, and they'll take it, and they'll apologize, and they'll say, sorry, sir, never happen again. And then they will go off into the kitchen, and they will do something unspeakable in your soup, and you'll never know about that. But they will find their way of getting their own back. And so this goes back to what we were talking about before. Just because you can be rude, just because you can force something through, because you've got the power, you're the boss, you've got a bigger army than them, you've got more resources you can bring to the negotiations than them. Just because you can force something through doesn't mean you should, because the other person will take it, but then they'll go off and they'll do something unspeakable in your soup, basically, which you don't want to know about.
And do you have a tip for people who might be sitting out there now going, well, that's all fine and dandy when everybody's nice to each other. What do you do when you meet the bee from hell, that person who's running the old school? I'm going to be really I won't use the swear word, but I'm going to be that. Yeah. So what are your tips? Because some people will say to me, but you guys are just living in some fairy tale land where, what about the boss or the person who is the power broker, and that's all they put on the table is and threaten people and bully. So maybe just talk a little bit, because I think that's the kind of thing people would really like to get a tip or two for.
Yeah. And actually there's lots to say about, lots and lots and lots. And I do get that's one of the big fears that people have around negotiation. And when I talk about win-win negotiations, the classic pushback I get is exactly that. Simon, great in theory, but you haven't seen the person I'm negotiating with. So, but there is lots and lots that you can say about that. In the book, I actually developed the methodology that I call strong win-win, and it is this idea about go for win-win, but be strong, so that if they do try anything on, you can be strong, and it's not going to impact you. If they try any trickery, you'll be up to it, and you'll notice it. If they if they shout at you, if they do anything aggressive or whatever, you can deal with it. You can just let it bounce off you. But even more than that, much better than that, there are many things that you can do that can actually make that person more win-win than they are currently. So that counterparty who perhaps isn't a natural win-win player, there are many, many things that you can do to make them more of a win-win player in a way that they wouldn't be with other people, but they would be with you. So, you can kind of build that relationship with them in such a way that, they might be sneaky with somebody else, they might be aggressive with somebody else, but they're not going to be with you. And there are many parts of that. A key part is having a strong plan B, having that willingness to walk away, that willingness to, as I said before, look, there are plenty of deals out there in the world to be had. So one way of making that other person a better negotiator, a more collaborative negotiator, is your willingness to walk away. Now, to be willing to walk away, you've got to have a good place to walk away to lined up. So that's part of your preparation as well. They say if you're buying a house, never fall in love with one house, fall in love with three. So because if you fallen in love with a house, they're going to know, and they're going to reel you in, and you'll end up buying the house, but you'll pay top dollar for it. Whereas if you've fallen in love with three houses, you will get a great house, you'll end up living in a fabulous house, and you'll get it at a good price because you're not dependent on any single one of them. You're willing to walk away from any single one of them. So that willingness to walk away is one of the key things that's going to get the other person more collaborative.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with you that, what do they technically call it? The BATNA, the best alternative to no agreement. And that, again, comes down to also having clarity on your criteria and knowing what that means. What does a good and bad agreement and no agreement mean for you?
And is specifically with respect to your interests. Again, it is with respect to your interests. Is your BATNA better for your interests, or is this current conversation better for your interests? And that's the decision you need to be making. And if at any point your BATNA is better for your interests, great, that's when you walk away.
Yeah. And often in the commercial world, if you're approached by somebody who's interested in what you have to offer, and they maybe start saying to you, but, don't you want to do business with us? Now, at the end of the day, if the conditions they're asking for are stringent, actually you didn't have a deal with them the day before they contacted you. So, at the end of the day, you kind of are back at square one. It is a possibility if you can overcome the emotions that are going with the, wanting to do the deal. But let's just move now to the personal stuff, because I know you got a few nice stories about, and in the current day and age, there might be some mobility out there as people start to move around jobs and other things. And what's some of the personal examples you can give of working with people and helping them embrace these principles to further their own personal interests?
Well, as I said, I think it's negotiation is applicable everywhere. I've had clients rebuild relationships with their parents who they hadn't spoken to for years. I've had clients get 40% pay rises on their on their salary, this kind of stuff. So it's applicable in so many different contexts. I've had clients save their relationship. It's the same skills, whether we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar merger or something like Brexit, or whether we're talking about with our kids or who's going to take the rubbish out. It is the same structures and the same skills involved.
I finished by asking Simon whether anyone can become good at negotiating. So let's hear what he had to say and some of the useful tips he provides on how to get better at this important life skill.
So can anybody become a negotiator?
Yes, absolutely. They can, because there are, again, we tend to view negotiation as this mysterious process. Everybody's, nobody's budging, it's gone silent in the room. And then somebody says something and suddenly everybody's best friends again, slapping each other on the back, shaking hands and signing an agreement. And how on earth did they come up with that one thing? It's not a mysterious process. There are structures to it. There are processes. And if you understand what those are, then you can learn to negotiate. Now, it is a skill, and it's the nature of skills, firstly, that you can learn them. So that's great. And you can master them. It's the nature of skills that you can master them. So you really can, anybody really can become a master at negotiation. And given that we're saying they're so pervasive in our world, it's a good skill to choose to master. But that journey of mastery is a never-ending journey. So no matter how good you are at the moment, you can always get better. You can always improve.
Yeah. And there's this difference between knowing what and knowing how. This is always, yes. You come up against it increasingly in the world of training most of this stuff is cognitively easy to get.
Yes.
It's implementing it. However, as a way to sort of get to the end of our fantastic conversation, I've enjoyed it a lot, is some tips for the person out there who, is really thinking, I wish I could get better at negotiating. And of course, signing up for one of your courses would be the ultimate prize, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Here. And we'll put details in because your website is called Negotiation Mastery, right? So, yeah. But just a couple of takeaways for people who are thinking, but I'll never be able to. It's okay for these guys, and they've been doing it for a long time. So I always run into these difficult situations. What are the few things to help people overcome maybe some of those limiting beliefs and get some confidence in themselves? What are a few tips now to?
Yeah. So no matter how good you are, I would say the simple process of mastering a skill, even if you're a beginner or if you're already brilliant at it already, the simple process is firstly, do the studying of the best practice. So negotiation is a hugely researched field, given how important it is, the kinds of things that hang off it, Brexit, peace treaties, multi-billion-dollar mergers. So because such important things hang off it, a huge amount of research has gone into what makes a successful negotiator. So study that, do that research, or study the output of that research. Read the best practice, read the theory. And then any negotiation that you have, and if we start to view negotiation as this pervasive thing is, some people might say, but I only negotiate, I hardly ever negotiate. I bought a house 2 years ago and that was a negotiation, but I haven't done anything since. But if we start to view any interaction as a micro negotiation of a kind, then before that negotiation, you plan it with respect to the theory. You have a look at the theory and say, well, how does that theory apply to this situation? Then you go in and have the conversation, do, and hopefully it'll go well, but it might not. Either way, it doesn't matter. Afterwards, you review, again, with respect to the best practice, what worked, what didn't work, what could you do differently next time? And if you do that with every micro negotiation that you're involved in, you're going to master negotiation. That planning with respect to the best practice, doing it, and then reviewing afterwards, that is the process of mastering any negotiation. And if you can do that very rapidly, you're going to become a very good negotiator.
Yeah, and there's an important message there about learning is a process of feedback, a constant feedback, and recalibrating and modifying what you did. Is that ability to look at something and say that went well, and then say, what was it that made it go well, versus that didn't go well, what was it that I could do differently next time?
Exactly. The example that I always give is somebody like Roger Federer. Let's take Roger Federer, arguably the greatest tennis player in the history of the game. Today, he will go on the court and he will try and improve. And he will spend time with his coach. After each tournament, he'll spend time with his coach, whether he won it or whether he didn't win it. And he will think, okay, let's review that tournament. What worked in it? What didn't work? What can we do differently for the next tournament? Even though he's already arguably the greatest tennis player ever. And that's exactly how he got to that place.
Yeah. And I like the example that, people, when I was training NLP for people, some people would say to me, okay, this is great in the room. Where could I use this stuff? And I go, look outside. Life is your laboratory, basically.
Yes.
It's not something that just sits in a classroom. And it's only by going out. And I always say to people, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is a big one, pick something around 4, 3 or 4. It's just something,
exactly.
Just find out what happens. And don't be too hard on yourself if it kind of doesn't work. Just laugh it off and move on, because life's too short for that. Do the small ones, enough small ones, and when the big ones come along, you'll probably do quite well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly that. Even if it's just, they did research into the high street, and this is before COVID, so it's probably much more applicable now. But even before COVID, they did research into the high street. And if you go into a shop, a clothes shop or something like that, and you ask for a discount, it's really surprising. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's really surprising how much they are likely to give you a discount simply because you ask. And if you smile and build relationship and crack a joke with them beforehand, and if you give a reason why they might give you a discount, again, you're increasing your chances of getting that discount so much more. So just give it a try and you'll learn. Yeah.
So that's great, Simon. Thanks very much for sharing these words of wisdom. Your excellent books. I really recommend them to people. I'll say that for you. And we'll put details in the show notes. And I know you've also been posting quite some interesting material on LinkedIn this last while, and people can find you in various platforms. Anywhere else they can check? Where can they check you out?
Yeah, so I am putting a lot of material out there, as you say, both in video form and in blog form. And that's on my blog on negotiationmastery.com, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Vimeo. I'm on Twitter. I am the Simon Horton at Twitter. And they're probably the best places to check me out. Yeah.
Right, without further ado, thanks very much for being my guest, Simon.
Well, thanks very much, Jerry. Thanks very much for having me here. And just to wish you and all of your listeners the very best of luck in all your negotiations.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. You will find details of what we covered in the show with links, etc. in the show notes. Please share your key takeaways from today's guest and let your friends and colleagues know about the podcast. Oh, and if there's a particular author or leading thinker you'd like me to interview, just get in touch and I'll do my best to get them on the show. This episode was brought to you by Wide Circle, helping you make better talent decisions. To learn more, visit widecircle.eu. That's WIDECIRCLE.eu. Until next time.